as you guys know, if you've been following along with Nootropics Depot, we are after the truth, and we really want to know and ensure that the botanical that we are using for our products is actually what it's claimed to be, and confirming that is not an easy task.
Absolutely not. And it's even a harder task when everything you've tested fails for Ecklonia cava, and then you're just kind of out of options. And we realized at a certain point that we had to go to Korea. For anyone amongst us that has maybe tried to work with South Korean companies, it seems to be a little bit hard. South Korean companies prefer to work with other South Korean companies, and we weren't really able to get into contact with any of the South Korean companies that were supplying Ecklonia cava. It was really hard. We were getting ignored by all of them, and one time Paul was actually on a flight in the US, and he sat next to a South Korean lady, and they had a long conversation about all sorts of things, and Paul mentioned that he was into supplements, and he mentioned that he really liked Ecklonia cava, and it comes from Korea, and this woman was very familiar with Ecklonia cava, and she said, I actually know someone who processes Ecklonia cava. But she kind of confirmed to Paul too that it is kind of hard to work together with South Korean companies. They do not like working with companies outside of South Korea. So that really got us started on that line of thinking. And then we did meet one person in Korea, and they told us this exact same thing again. It's going to be really hard for you to work with South Korean companies unless you kind of are a South Korean company. So this person in South Korea, they helped us set up a facility there. We got it FDA registered. And that allowed us to finally start actually even receiving samples to test. This is how hard it was. Usually you can always get a sample. The only sample we were able to get out of Korea was a topical skincare product that does seem to get exported a little bit. But the stuff for oral consumption, it seems to stay in Korea. So we set up this Korean company. We have a Korean office now and an FDA-registered facility where we can now import from within Korea. We can import Ecklonia cava there, and then we can export it from that facility to the US. And this worked really well. It obviously took quite a while to set this up. We had to find a facility to rent. We had to find someone to work together with. We had to set it up. We have to get it FDA registered. So that took at least a year, if not longer. But now we actually have a steady supply of Ecklonia cava, and we can choose from many different vendors within Korea. And that's also really important because we tested a lot of different products. And now to kind of get into the chemistry of it all, whenever we're looking for a new product, we usually are looking for it because it contains unique bioactive molecules. When you just say Ecklonia cava, that could be a lot of different compounds. And you want to focus on a few quality markers to see that, is this Ecklonia cava going to be effective? And one of the compounds that we were very interested in, or a class of compounds that we were very interested in, were the fluorotannins. And the fluorotannins are these polyphenol-like compounds that exist in Ecklonia cava, and the one that we chose from that is diethyl. You see a lot of research focusing on diethyl, and more importantly, a diethyl reference standard was easily available.
Emil and I chatted about this a little bit because I wanted some clarity on what a reference standard really is and sort of the minutia. And we talk a lot about reference standards for lion's mane. That was our last podcast because Nootropics Depot has our own Arinimax lion's mane mycelium product, and this was something where we were matching basically our lion's mane product to a reference standard of lion's mane, and in that case we're talking about a botanical reference standard. Yes. But that botanical reference standard, maybe let's say that tiny little piece of lion's mane, is something very different.
Let me just quickly correct you. It's not a botanical reference standard, it's a botanical reference material.
Thank you.
BRM.
Botanical reference material.
And a BRM is, as it sounds, it's literally a piece of lion's mane mushroom, a piece of Ecklonia cava, but more importantly, it's a piece of Ecklonia cava or a piece of lion's mane that has been verified by a botanist to be that thing. And what we do then, we take that piece of lion's mane, we take that piece of Ecklonia cava, we run it through the HPTLC, that creates a little fingerprint, we know what it should look like now. Then we take another sample, for example, our Ecklonia cava product, we do the same process to it, we put it on the HPTLC plate, and if everything is correct, it should show the same fingerprint, and then they match up. So that's great.
However, what we're talking about now is actually not BRMs, botanical reference materials, but we are talking about a reference standard of a pure compound, in this case diethyls, and that compound is what we have standardized the Ecklonia cava to for our product.
Yeah, and the only way you can test for a compound, similar with the BRM, which, by the way, we are talking about reference standards here, but we also went through that process with the BRMs for Ecklonia cava, because we had to go to Korea, we had to find some real whole Ecklonia cava, we got that verified by a botanist, then we got it into our lab, we ran it through our HPTLC, so we have a method for determining if a powder that we're getting, we run it through, and then the HPTLC can tell us, yeah, that is actually Ecklonia cava and not a different type of species. Maybe even, it could even be Ecklonia bicyclis. This is another Ecklonia species that actually contains similar compounds, but it is something different, and we want Ecklonia cava. So that's why we need a botanical reference material. So that's definitely a good thing to cover. But then, like Erica was saying, the more important thing in our case, not more important, the really important thing is that you have the actual plant that you're after, or seaweed in this case. But for me, what's really important is to determine how much of the bioactives are then in that plant. And to do that for Ecklonia cava, we set our sights on diethyl. Like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of research on it, and a reference standard was easily available.